Better Way Foundation is a community-based organization, which is relatively new. Originally, A Better Way was designed to implement public policy and kind of do the policy wonk stuff at the Capitol. Over the last few years, we've incorporated in A Better Way strategy, actual community organizing, public education, civic engagement. So we do a lot of work around primarily drug policy reform. But then we've included in that a bunch of criminal justice reform, building social capital through drug policy and criminal justice reform. Currently, we're working on expanding the pardons process for first nonviolent felons, and long term, this is all part of the same bill this year. And part of that will be violent felons, conditional pardons for violent felons, long term. We're also working on medical marijuana. The third and main issue we're working on, and this is the one we're really wrestling with, is how do we reform drug-free school zone laws. And it's interesting because the other two issues, pardon reform and medical marijuana, does not really give us the same opportunity that school zones do. School zones allow us to implement or address other issues like racism, racial disparities within the criminal justice system, as well as drug policy reform, as well as criminal justice reform because of the mandatory minimum. So we think school zones really gives us the opportunity to kind of, really roll all of our talent out in one shot.
You hear the methamphetamine conference. As I understand, methamphetamine is not really a major issue yet up in Connecticut, except for the club kids going into New York. And
it's interesting because even though the meth issue, right, is not a big issue in Connecticut, all of us who kind of like are in the movement and we know, what the signs of what potential problems are or where changes need to be made, we know that meth isn't a big issue in Connecticut, but the legislature is attempting to kind of take the same strategy they use for crack cocaine, right? The scare tactics, new mandatory minimums, registry, and all these other things that we've successfully fought and defeated for the last couple of years. But the meth issue affords us something else, right? Which I think Connecticut is a part of a very small group of folks that can do this, right? States that we work in the movement. And that we can have a conversation around drug policy and criminal justice reform through our undoing racism lens. So traditionally when we talk about drug policy reform, we talk about communities of color, we talk about low income, white communities, rural, suburban communities. What the meth is, and we struggle with that because some of the most conservative people against drug policy reform are communities of color, people in communities of color or urban communities. What the meth issue has afforded us is the ability to talk about why the criminal justice system needs to be changed, and engage people of color and urban communities about that without an issue that really is that's too close to them in order that inhibits them from having an objective conversation. So we've used the meth issue, even though the meth crisis is not a big crisis in Connecticut. We've used that issue to engage urban communities, all right, in a conversation and a dialogue about that reform.
So now, what do you think about the conference? What are your impressions? What surprised you?
I think the conference is great. Nothing surprised me. I haven't been surprised as yet, right, or at this point of anything. Exactly what I thought would happen is happening. The experts are here, folks on the ground. I think it's a great, diverse group of people on the ground, researchers, what we call grass tops folks, as well as some folks who do work in grassroots. What I feel like is missing from the conference, obviously, which would make sense, is a larger presence of people of color. But it makes sense because the majority communities of color across the country are not dealing with meth, right? And though we take that model in Connecticut and we use the meth issue as a way of having this objective conversation about drug policy reform, that obviously has not spread across, that strategy has not spread across the country. So other than that, I think the conference is great. All the information has been great. And again, for us, it's magnificent information because we take it back and it helps to feed this other conversation.